camera, pretty fabulous. So, ambassador training. We are all ambassadors for organizations we represent. Tonight we're obviously talking about all of you being ambassadors for Brighton Volunteer Ambulance. I spent a lot of years in nonprofit PR in the museum world, and I went to a museum conference, and we talked about just the role of the museum employee. And someone said something that stuck with me. When you walk through the museum, the visitor knows that you're an employee of the museum, almost as if an actor crossing a stage. You are that much on. So if you're work at the museum, whether they can see your badge or not, and read your name, if they know you're an employee and you maybe are kind of rude to somebody, or you walk by a gum wrapper on the floor, they're going to think, wow, why didn't that person do something? So that's a little bit of an apples and oranges example, but the reality is we are all ambassadors for Brighton Volunteer Ambulance. So all we're going to do for the next hour is think about how can we best represent BVA. Are we representing Brighton Volunteer Ambulance the best way we can at all times, in uniform, out of uniform? And obviously I'm not talking about during emergency response. I mean, that of course, but mostly we're talking about all the other times when people know you're affiliated with the organization and they ask you about it in line at Wegmans, or they see how you're acting in uniform, etc. So to get started, just wanted to go around, we'll introduce ourselves, get an idea of maybe learn something new about each other today. Love you to share a fun fact. So my name is Dresden. I have been working with Brighton Volunteer Ambulance for more than a year now with Michael Pollack and Dennis and Barb as part of a special project committee to really get a pulse of Brighton Volunteer Ambulance's view in the community. As you'll see in part of the presentation, we're going to review some survey results that showed that your work is rated quite highly, you're thought of quite highly. But there's also some misperceptions. There's also some things we can educate folks about. And it all comes down to having the facts, having the proper attitude, and making friends along the way. So, fun fact about me, I don't always have laryngitis. That's not a fun fact, that's a dream. Fun fact is that I love to do theater, and my dream role was playing the very loud, obnoxious Madame Thenardier in Les Mis, and I got to play that role with Pittsburgh Musicals 3 years ago, so dreams come true. Start with you, sir.
My name is Artie Schultz. I've only been with Brighton for 10 months, but I've been doing EMS for 36 years. Yeah, so I'm old. And a fun fact that you might not know, that I'm a hard worker. Okay? Really? You see, you didn't know that.
That's fun. No, fun fact. I had fun. That was fun. It's fun.
So this is a repeat performance. Right?
My name's Adam. I've been with Brighton 2 years. Fun fact, I'm leaving.
I would try really hard not to be fun, but I do comedy on the side, so it's probably not going to happen. Sorry. So something that stayed with me for my days when I was a cub reporter for the Brighton Pittsburgh Post, when it was a real paper. I was going to do a story about an executive at Xerox. So her offices are way up, and so I get in the elevator, and I'm heading up to one of the higher floors, and I see in the elevator it says, "Are you discussing Xerox business in public?" Anybody work at Xerox? Anybody ever see this in the elevator? Still in the elevators? Why do you think that is?
It says don't talk Xerox business.
Is it, I'm going back 25 years here. Okay. Don't, ooh, I think it was nicer in the 90s. Don't talk Xerox business in public? What do you think about that? Do you ignore it now? Think it's a good suggestion?
Yes. No, I think it's a good idea.
Good idea? Yeah. You might say the wrong thing at the wrong time. When they, I mean, it's possible when they went up, it's when Xerox and Kodak had their copier wars going on. You never know, right? The reality is what you say in public, you never know who's listening. You never know who's watching your body language. You never know what you're saying. And so that's always stuck with me, that this company had to go to that length to remind you. And I heard it's in the Webster elevators as well, not just downtown. So the reality is, I know you're all adults, sophisticated adults, proud to work for BVA, but this is just to help us remember how we can make more friends in the community. It leads to goodwill, makes our day a little happier to smile, and also, sure, does it maybe lead to a more educated community that helps things along, embraces us more, and then maybe ultimately donates more money. There's many reasons why stopping and thinking that at all times you're an ambassador for BVA is a good idea. So we got a pulse of what the community thought about BVA, and we were very happy with the results. How many folks attended a session where I stood up here a little less laryngitic a year ago and shared some results from that? All right, great, a handful of you. Last week, no one in the room had been there. So I apologize to those of you, but we're just gonna do a quick summary. We were working with the Special Projects Committee. Do I have the name right, Barb? Special Projects Committee.
Actually, your project management team.
Project management team, to get a pulse of the community. And the way we did that is we worked through neighborhood associations, we worked through churches, we worked through a whole bunch of organizations to do an anonymous third person distributed through Dresden Public Relations. And distribution boards included neighborhood associations, senior living facilities, faith groups, JCC, and different organizations in town. And these folks were ambassadors for us, presidents of neighborhood associations that had a historic Brighton, the membership director of JCC, who some of you know. And of course, we loved when we went to the senior homes. JCC, they said, we will do anything for Brighton Voluntary Ambulance. They're here every week. And the day that I was dropping off hard copies to Brighton Voluntary Ambulance, they said, as a matter of fact, you were just here an hour ago and saved somebody's life in an exercise class. So these people were very, very happy to do anything they could for Brighton Voluntary Ambulance. We estimated between emailed surveys and hard copy. We even sat here and worked with some seniors to fill out some answers as well. So we covered a cross-section of folks. We got back 500, and we estimated we reached out to a pool of 2,000. That ends up being 25% participation, but the more important thing is a 95% confidence rating. So we feel pretty good. We did a good cross-section of who, of what people were thinking. Mutually developed with BVA, and then the surveys were shared directly. Bless you.
Thank you.
All right, so let's give you some idea of who these people were. This is what we learned through analyzing the surveys. 78% lived in Brighton, but an additional 11.6% both worked and lived in Brighton. So the majority of the folks lived here. The roughly 7% who only worked in Brighton would be folks who worked with the senior homes, JCC, etc. 3% who neither work nor live in Brighton, working out at the JCC, going to church, etc. We had a full cross-section of age, pretty low on the 18 side, but it was 18 through 65 plus. 50% of the respondents have been directly involved in a medical emergency. 90% said the community would be impacted without BVA. This wasn't a trick question how we set them up, but this is how many people said, do you think the community would be impacted if there was no Brighton Voluntary Ambulance? Many people could have thought, well, we're not that far from the hospitals. We could call a downtown ambulance. Somebody could come from Henrietta, right? They could have thought this in their heads. But 90% of the people said, no, we know we need BVA. And this was pretty fabulous. 80% described BVA service as excellent. The very next one down was very good. The one after that was good. Those are the only ones that were checked, which is great. But 80% of them went for the highest. So congratulations. They have awesome allergy pills, by the way.
I have horrible allergies, I'm sorry.
Nothing stops her sneezing.
No.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, so as we went on, we gauged what some of the misperceptions were of BVA. 41% they'd be surprised to get a bill. 22% had no idea BVA offered additional services other than emergency response. 80% inaccurately estimated how many emergency calls were received in 2014. They were way low. Most hovered around the 2,000, 1,000, 54 guys, 5,400. 80% inaccurately estimated how many volunteers are working with BVA. And it's good, about 1 in 2, half of the people remembered seeing BVA at community events. So let's throw the facts in with these. BVA is required by law to bill for all emergency services. We're going to be going over some frequently asked questions that will give you the answers you need going forward. But right now, we'll just finish going through some facts of this survey. 22%. The truth is, BVA loans medical equipment, offers CPR training, etc. So the 22% who didn't know about additional services, of course you all know there are. 80% inaccurately estimated how many emergency calls? More than 5,000. 23 volunteers, and that's just a reminder of about half the
high or
time.
low on the volunteers?
We actually double-checked that number with Barb.
As active volunteers as of right now.
No, I'm saying, was the community high or low when guessing the estimate?
They thought more volunteers?
That's what I
Yes.
thought. I just wanted to.
I'll tell you what, at the end, I give you guys something to fill out. I'm gonna go on my computer and find that answer for you. Because I don't remember the exact stat, but I can easily find it in my computer.
High or low
It'll take me
is
like 2
fine.
minutes.
High is good.
I think it was high.
It was higher.
Yeah, it's the word volunteer. It confuses every town who has a volunteer in the name. So, but I can get you that number before we wrap today. All right, public perception. Let's just summarize what we saw in this survey. The organization is valuable in the eyes of the community, providing excellent service with strong brand recall. Misperceptions exist regarding services, funding, call volume, number of volunteers, and the use of the word volunteer. Again, things you knew, but again, scientifically done survey confirming it. So, you are an ambassador. You're the face of BVA, the image, whether you're in uniform or not. When you are standing in line at Wegmans, when you are being asked, tell me more about BVA. How come I never got a bill? How about this? How about that? You guys get hit with a lot of questions. Does anybody have any feedback about some of the questions you get out and about that probably might surprise your fellow neighbor, or you get it so all of you get it so often?
A lot of people don't realize that we're separate within the fire department.
That's right.
And do you mind if I ask what answer you give when they
I
ask?
always tell them that we're separate because they think, like, I'll take for like Blossom Road, there's a firehouse there, and they're like, well, how come the fire truck got here before you? Well, we're separate than the fire department. Really? So they think that the fire department and the ambulance are all together, and they don't think that there's a difference.
And do you think it's because a response vehicle goes out from the fire department, or just people just think emergency services all hang out together?
Well, there's a lot of agencies that have a fire and ambulance, you know, like Help per se, they have the fire department and the ambulance are together.
Mhm.
And then you have places like here and Grease Ambulance and Henrietta, they're separate from the fire department, people don't understand.
And this might be too hard for you to answer, but do you think that might hurt with, you know, people realizing just how hard y'all work and, you know, as far as donations?
As donations, maybe, I mean, but they see us probably more than they do the fire department, so they might understand that, you know, we work a little harder. But they're thinking that, you know, the donation they give to the fire department goes to us as well, and, I mean.
Yep.
I've actually had someone give me a donation, and on the check it said to Brighton Fire Department.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's the one thing, I don't know if you brought that up in your community outreach or whatever, but I mean, that's something that they don't really know that we're separate. I mean, they know we have an ambulance base, and
Right.
but they might think that we have an ambulance at every
Just a-
firehouse and then here.
Yeah, and it's just another property of the fire department. Anybody else have any other thing to share on that?
I've been getting over the past couple of years since we got Mercedes ambulance, people, oh, is that why my taxes are so high? Must be nice to afford Mercedes, not realizing that they're actually, cheaper and better.
And do you feel you have to defend that, or
I do, I explain it.
Yeah, explain it. So the reality is, you know, when you are an ambassador for the organization, to not appear defensive, but just simply explain. And when most people know how to explain that, the reality is they're actually more affordable and better operating vehicle. Anybody else hear anything in the field that you wish was a misperception we could squash and educate folks about? One gentleman last week noted that he gets the morbid question, like, what's the worst thing you've ever seen? So he said he just makes something up and goes, oh, there was this shooting once, and just leaves it. You're gonna add something?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think the general public doesn't understand that we don't respond lights and sirens to everything, and that just because they called 911 doesn't mean it's an actual emergency. So when we drive there without lights and sirens on and it takes forever, it's not our decision. Like, it's how the call came in.
Or how we transport people.
Right.
Why don't we have your lights and
Yeah.
sirens on? Because
It's
it's
constant,
safer
all the time now.
for our safety and the village.
That's actually happening more and more. Like,
Yeah.
People don't really understand that there's, I mean, yeah, you call because you have a toothache, but it's not, no lights and sirens to it, but yeah, somebody that has chest pains, we might, because it's a life-threatening emergency.
Right, so they may think that you weren't prioritizing their call because you didn't come blaring in.
The other misconception I've seen in the past is they think because they call the ambulance that they can get right into a bed at emergency, get seen quicker. And that's a misconception about a lot of people, because sometimes they have to go out to the waiting room. And then they ask me, I called you guys, why am I not getting to bed?
Yeah.
I said, I don't know, go ask Mel.
And I said, she's upstairs.
Mel's in karate, take a
I'm going to
check.
kickboxing class.
So part of the work that we'll continue to do with Barb and the committee is try to figure out how we can do this outreach to the community, and what kind of educational tools and messages do we have to have. So that's why I'm taking notes of what you're sharing today. So how many folks are really enjoying the new website? You've been driving folks there to see, answer some of their questions and get a better idea of who you are. Give to the health and safety of our community. Make a gift today. Health and safety of the community. We feel that that really is the message that folks are understanding based on our survey results. Taking care of our community, professionalism, compassion, respect. They let part-timers in those pictures. Your skills can save a life. Learn first aid, AED, CPR from expert professionals. Was that a bad joke? Sorry.
I'm full-time.
I thought you said you were going part-time next
I'm
week.
going.
That was my bad joke. See, sorry. We need people like you. Gain skills to last a lifetime. So there's some really good messaging in here and beautiful models I might add. All right, frequently asked questions. Barb helped us with these, rather than just show you these very dense slides. It's all written out for you to keep and take away, and we only had a handful of folks last week, so I may need to,
I can't read anyway. I do have my glasses. We can share. We can make copies when we get back.
one per house.
Thank you.
We know. I hear it all the time.
Thank you so much. All right, what is BVA's corporate structure? In line at Wegmans, in passing with a stranger, you might not be able to get a chance for all of this, but I'm sure there are family and friends and other folks that we want to be ambassadors for Brighton Volunteer Ambulance under your behalf. Kind of like how those neighborhood association folks sent out those emails for us. Then it wasn't a stranger in their inbox. They weren't feeling like they were being spammed, but it was their neighborhood association representative or the membership person from the JCC sending the email on our behalf. It is so great to have ambassadors in the community, and you have a lot of them. So your family and friends and the folks you chat with can continue to be these ambassadors. So that's why we wanted you to have a little bit of deeper answers to some of these questions. So what's the corporate structure? Independent, 501c3, New York State Corporation, under contract to the town of Brighton to provide 24/7 emergency medical services. You can share with that that doesn't necessarily mean that you are fully funded or owned by the town of Brighton. It just means you're under contract by. How are you funded? BVA's primary income source is third-party insurance billing, and that accounts for 83% of our operating revenue. The town of Brighton contract for emergency medical services provides 13% of the revenue. This is the shocker. Fund drive and donations provide an additional 4% of our revenue. Maybe we can edit this out of the video, but do you happen to know, just from being friends with people in the community, what percentage this is for the fire department? Do we know? Just just curious, or other nonprofits. I've worked in nonprofits my whole life, and that is a shockingly low number.
I would say maybe
Because of the bills.
15 to 20% might come from fundraisers, depending on the fire department, and depending on the
That's
area.
it for her department?
And a lot of nonprofits in general. So, yeah, 4%. So this is one reason why we need to educate. When you work for a nonprofit, sure, you're not the full-time fundraiser, but at all times you are the ambassador for that organization. And the more funds, the more supplies, the more people that can get helped, the more people you can hire. You know, you live it. You know how important it is to have more support and supplies. So 4%. So that's a good thing to let people know. That's a good little wake-up call. Major source of funding. Although a nonprofit corporation, the major revenue comes from patient insurance billing. They don't understand what that means. We bill the patient's insurance company in accordance with all applicable laws. And here's the thing, and I'm glad Barb's here. You don't have to wear this on your shoulders. Call our business office. Call our base and talk to our business office. They'd be happy to answer any questions you have about billing or funding. And so that's, I'm gonna give you some takeaways so you could have that phone number handy. Privacy policy. BVA adheres to all laws regarding HIPAA and privacy, and any requests for a patient's personal health care records need to be directed to the business office. So again, you're out and about, especially in an emergency situation. You don't have time to answer certain questions, and even if you are having a leisurely turkey dinner with family, it's still easier to go, you know what, our folks in our business office answer that. I got a heck of a lot of stuff, other stuff I got to worry about. Does BVA offer training? Training for the community, CPR, EAD classes at various times throughout the year in either our training center or at a corporate facility. I'm sure most of you know that you do offer a service for pay where you will go out and train outside of base. And the call volume. BVA receives approximately 5,400 calls for service on an annual basis. We're not picking on the fire department. We love the fire department. They're good people, they do great work, but darn, you don't have a ticker at 12 corners that tells how many calls you had. So how surprised are your family and friends that it's that high?
People are really surprised.
They are. So you like kind of telling them?
Like the people that have asked me, and we've always told them we're around 5,000 calls, and they're very surprised to hear that. They thought it was less than that, actually.
And then you can throw in, can you believe that many calls and only 4% of our funding comes from the actual donations from the community? And that's not to make them feel bad, but it's all about education and telling a story. Special events. Participate in town activities, July 4th, homecoming, farmers market. Of the 50% we showed on the earlier color slide, where it noted people recall seeing you at events, farmers market and 4th of July were the two that most people responded to that they've seen you at. So when you're at those events this summer, wave your flag high and say hi to all your friends out there. Additional events, neighborhood block parties, parades, races, demonstrations for the community. You've all volunteered, you know this. Additional services. BVA provides blood pressure screenings at our base as well as blood pressure clinics within the community. There's the loan closet for Brighton residents, wheelchairs, walkers, crutches, canes available for short-term use. We had some feedback last week on this situation right here. And the reality was that some folks said that if they're in really good shape, they'll tell them to call the business office for a donation, but you're pretty full up. However, there are some wear and tear, and you could always trade out newer ones. So I guess it's on a case-by-case basis. Again, if you're in the field, a lot easier just to say call our business office. Any suggestions, Barb, on how to handle it when somebody's like, you want my cane, you want my wheelchair?
Well, you know, normally what we tell them to do, if it's in good condition, they can drop it off at the base and we'd be glad to take a look at it, see if it's safe enough for us to accept. You know, because they think it's in great condition. Of course, when we get it, it may not be. So most of the time we'll take them anyway, and then if we need to, shall we say, make them go away, we will.
And sometimes they're donating something that has a sentimental value, right?
True.
It's their deceased relative's item they no longer need, and to turn them away and make them take it back home can be pretty painful.
Yeah.
So it's really nice that that's how you handle it. Did you have anything else you wanted to add on that part?
Well, you know, as everybody in this room already knows, a lot of times we get requests, you know, where people want to donate things like, you know, shower chairs and toilet seats, and we can't accept those. And we tell that to people when they call on the phone. So just because you have an item that is in good condition and you think that you'd like to donate to the loan closet, if it's not, it's something that has to be kept sanitary, such as those 2 items, we can't take them because we don't have a way to do that.
So for the most part, just stick to wheelchairs,
Just
walkers,
those items
crutches, and
that you
canes.
have listed right there.
So we made up this handy dandy card. Handy dandy card is a 4-sided business card. I'm gonna pass this around. I'd like y'all to take a few. States the mission, just as a good reminder. Services provided by the EPA, of course, 911 emergency calls, but then all the other things, blood pressure screening, loan closet, ambulance standby, and the fabulous information cards, group presentations, etc. And then on the back, that phone number and an email address for the business office. So these are for you to give out to folks in the community. We have a whole nother box, so take a handful, please, and pass them around. Thank you. Dennis said they might even put some in the rigs as well. But it's just a good way to be able to hand off that card to folks. So take a small stack. They're a little clunky being 4-sided, but hopefully it'll help you answer some questions.
27124.
Hold on, let's ask.
Yes.
I know.
On the donations, the overall 4% is fairly low for the organization as a whole, but there are literally hundreds of Brighton residents that have written checks for more than $100 donation to the agency. Some of them $250, $500, $1,000 personal check for $1,000 donation. So when I'm meeting someone in town, I wouldn't necessarily suggest that. I wouldn't want to suggest to someone that they're not donating enough, because it could be that person that just wrote a check for $500.
I'm so glad you said that, because I wasn't implying that, now I realize I was being dramatic about 4%, and may have come off that way. So by all means, you very well at any time, again, you're that actor crossing the stage at any time. You could be speaking to somebody who just gave 1,000 or gave 25, and that was all they had, which would be my case this week, that we all can relate, that you don't want them to feel we don't appreciate those who gave. Even though we all know this is the town with the highest real estate in the entire county, the reality is the Ambassador Drive, Sangerham, that neighborhood, it's the highest real estate in the whole county. So, so yes, thank you so much for bringing that up. All right, so we're just going to do a review of community services. Healthcare leader. 6 services to keep our community healthy. I'm not going to read these verbatim because we've already covered them by looking at the FAQs. But the reality is that the first aid classes are very important, and this organization is the main source for that training for all town entities and other professionals. And it's okay to own that and offer that. Blood pressure screenings, loan closet, ambulance standby. I thought they said Elvis alert because my glasses aren't on. EMS alert. The complimentary EMS alert cards, I believe they're on the website now. Barbara, if you don't care about a magnet, you just want to put them on. Somebody said they're downloadable from the website now.
I don't know whether they're downloadable. I think you still have to come into the office.
Okay.
They may be in the future. Yes?
The new fridges, they don't, the magnet
Those
doesn't, do
work
not
on-
work on the new fridges.
Wow.
I found that out, we're obsolete, guys.
Did you ever stainless steel?
Okay, Chip, we have
There's,
to- you
not
have
me,
to-
but the people I was gonna slap down their fridge. Like
Gotta go on the
side.
side.
I'm like shocked.
So we'll have to brainstorm if there's another place where they can hang it
Gum,
Inside there.
I gave them gum,
inside their
Medicine cabinet.
took my gum.
In the medicine cabinet.
Thank you.
medicine cabinet.
I was hurt.
So, is there an interest that there's a lot of folks talking about how the senior senators, want more of these and how these are this very popular item. Is there a way that maybe more of these could be on your person the same way you'll have some of these cards, maybe some in the rigs if people are asking for
We give
them?
them out.
They're in the rigs.
They're already there?
And then,
Sounds good, thank you. And then, of course, group presentations. Barb, do you think that everybody,
I'm sorry?
sorry, with all the training you do, that most of your folks know about the level of group presentations and how many you can give and,
Not really.
okay.
I
So,
mean, basically, anytime we have any of these entities requesting some kind of a presentation, it goes to Shauna to see if, we can provide somebody to, meet the schedule of whoever may be asking. It's usually done through our training department.
so schools, businesses, organizations, again, if someone asks, yes, we do, on a variety of topics, call our business office. So here are some presentations available through BVA, and you can see these on the website actually. Preparing kids to go to the ER, power failure safety tips, winter safety tips, flu season, when is it an emergency, pool safety tips, and they can be downloaded from BrightonAmbulance.org.
No, in the future, they will be downloaded. They are currently not downloaded.
Why didn't we catch that in editing, Barb? It will be edited before Thursday's presentation, I promise. These will soon be able to be downloaded from the website. All right, here's all the reasons to be an ambassador. You all, if I gave you a piece of scratch paper, you would have totally agreed with all of these and written these down yourself. Pride at work. Feels good to feel good about what you do. Be proud of what you do. You're ensuring the health and safety of this whole community. Health of the organization. You're only as weak or as happy as your weakest and unhappiest link. And we all know that Debbie Downer person who drags you down for whatever reason, the we them mentality, it's in every organization. And the reality is you guys are doing amazing work. The community's appreciating you. You appreciate each other. It's the best way to work. Building relationships in the community. Job security, right? A happy person is usually an employed person. And because it's awesome. One of my coworkers did that line. That's a little too for me, but because it's just awesome to be an ambassador. All right, how to be a great ambassador. Know your customer. Know the people. Know how they are going to feel when they're upset. Know how they may react if they come at you with a crazy question and you realize, okay, I'm not really going to be educating that person that much, but I'm going to leave them feeling good about how I responded to their question. Know your products and services. Use consistent language. You have the mission statement inside these four-sided cards. Mission statement's being updated, I believe. But for now, you read that over and you get a really good sense. Be proud, positive, productive, prepared, and make an impact. I'm going to play with this little anagram. This little, it's a word I correct people on all the time. Why can't Acronym. I have not slept. I didn't get much sleep last night. My husband had a heart attack on Friday.
Wow.
So there's been a lot of sleep in my house, so forgive me. Acronym. I actually correct people all the time because people refer to just abbreviations as acronyms, and actually they're only acronyms if they spell a word, like NASA or Impact. So that's my pet peeves. That's the fact that I couldn't conjure the word. Thank you so much. So I want to give you these cards. These are for you to keep in your wallet. It spells out what the heck Impact is. And on the back, it also has the services. So if at any point you just want to whip the card out and remind somebody about all the other services. So these are for your use, not for external. The four-sided card is for you to give out as liberally as you want to the community so they can know more about the organization. But we can go over what Impact means. 1 second. Rob, you want some cards?
Sure, why not? I can pass it up here.
Gentlemen? All right, Impact, impressions. Right? One of the best commercials ever out there was you only get one chance to make a first impression. You want it to be lasting, you want it to be long. We all know that people will judge a whole team by a football player who did something bad, or a whole organization by somebody who did something bad, or a shady CEO. Let's never give anybody an opportunity to say anything negative about Brighton Volunteer Ambulance because one person had bad attitude that day. Or just maybe didn't carry him or herself in the right way in the community. Personality. Embrace yours. It's okay if you don't want to have fun, but you're a heck of a good EMT, aren't you? So, so your personality is that you do your job and you do your job well. Nobody says you have to be a puppeteer and a clown and making everybody laugh at the same time, but you do your job well. Attitude. Positive attitude. Positive attitude. Leave that person you talk to feeling better about him or herself than they did before you talked to them. Give them a little education. Make them be impressed with BVA, which ultimately, even if you're humble, will be a reflection on you. They'll ultimately be more impressed with you the more you educate them on the organization and all the good that you do. Communication, body language. I could sit here and bore you and show you a million videos about how we judge people far in advance of them ever opening their mouth based on their body language and their facial expression and their tone and their volume. Perhaps in an emergency situation, you're shouting because you need to, but somebody might be judging you by your tone because they might think it's not necessary. So just things to be conscious of in teamwork. You're not alone, you're the face, and collectively, you all are ambassadors. All right, expectations of an excellent ambassador. Using consistent language, the same language to describe the organization. You have FAQs, you have a mission statement, a little bit of homework, if you will, to bone up on. You strive to perfect your learning processes and procedures. You're going to love the next second half of this training session as much as you did the first half. You're proactive about answering community questions. If you don't know the answer, you know where to tell people to find it. Oh, our business office will be more than happy to help you with that. Here's a card, the number's on the back. And support materials and info, it's all available. I've given you handouts. So here are some opportunities to be an ambassador. I'm just going to give you some examples. So when you're out in the field in coming days, coming weeks, you might remember some of these scenarios. You're in uniform and you're in line at Wegmans. And someone asks you about BVA. Could be a crazy question, could be a good question. You could be in a hurry, you could be off duty. Still do the best you can to answer their question and make them feel good. You're not in uniform, you're at a community event. You're in a situation where you can be reactive or proactive. So you can just answer them and move on, or you can take the opportunity to educate them a little bit more. You're on a non-urgent service call, you're on the phone and somebody can overhear you, don't talk about Xerox business. You're at Thanksgiving dinner with your family. So where, when to be
I
an
found this
ambassador?
quote online. Sometimes when you're writing charts, I feel like it's the same thing over and over again, and then I just want to, stop writing charts. And sometimes my charts do lack, and I'm sure some of you have noticed that when you are down 7 charts and it's really busy, your quality of your charts get kind of bad. So I feel like that resonated with me. So we'll go over the objectives. There's 3 big, 4 or 5 big objectives, what we're going to cover. I don't know if that was a sneeze or not. Why do we write patient care reports or PCRs? Why do we write them, and what role do we have to play in writing PCRs? The lovely QA, QI, and what they have to do with PCRs and charts. And then what makes up a good PCR, and then we'll talk about refusals. Because there are some things that, like Hardy said, the consistency, there's some people who write fantastic refusals, and then there's some people who decide to write a few lines. And we'll go over what makes a good refusal, along with a real good transport, or really any chart. So why do we write PCRs? Duncan, why do we write PCRs?
It's a legal document that
Uh-huh.
explains what happened.
Okay, that's pretty, it's got the gist. Anyone want to add anything to that?
To get paid.
Billing. It's a big reason. So the first part, doing some research, it's part of the patient's medical record. It continues with them from the time you initiate patient care to when they get discharged, or even when they go to a nursing home or whatever. I don't know if that's the case, but I could imagine a provider at a nursing home being like, I wonder what caused this whole problem. And they look back, way back, way back. Eric, last class, had brought up a point. I'm trying.
Okay.
We can turn it down if you want. He brought up a good point last class when he was doing his nursing rotations, that he was dealing with a patient that had been in a nursing home for a gazillion years, and not really a gazillion years. It was like a considerable amount of time. So what they did was they looked back and tried to find out the reason why, because he asked, why is this patient in a nursing home? And at that point they had developed dementia and a whole slew of things that might have caused a person to be in a nursing home, but like what broke the the straw on the camel's back? They found out it was a fall. And they were able to find that with PCR. They actually keep it in their charts when you're looking at patient records. Tyler brought this one up. So reimbursement with health insurance companies.
it is used for billing. That's where S1 comes into play, or Neil's page. It's what you call it. It's Joe, Alex, and Neil's page. And then the other part is a legal purpose. So it's a legally binding document. So it's a chart that you are writing that is an account of everything that happened on that call. Whether it's something that is run-of-the-mill routine, transport to the hospital, grandma fell, or, you know, someone got shot, or some illegal activity happened, or drunk driving, car accidents and stuff like that. So another point I want to bring up with the legal aspect is that one call you guys took, you know, one of you took 4 years ago, you're getting subpoenaed now, you have to write a depo, and do you remember it? Do you think you're gonna be able to remember everything that happened 4 years ago on that one call? Hopefully you wrote a good chart, so that way when you write your chart, or read your chart, you're like, oh, I remember that. And it's detailed enough to where you're like, okay, we're cool. He got shot here, or wherever, whatever happened. That's a big point there at the end. A lot of people forget about that. So why do I care? You're the one giving the care, so you're the one who should be writing the chart. You know exactly what happened with that patient. You know how that patient reacted to the medications you gave. You were the one assessing vitals. So you should be able to put it all into your chart, right? The other part, accountability. So that way you know who did stuff. And then the other part, tracking of interventions, metrics. Some people were confused on the word metrics. It's simply a word to like say statistics or things that we track with location of calls, mutual aid calls, mostly like the referring, receiving. Neil does a whole spreadsheet at the end of each month or quarter where he sees, oh, we went to Henrietta or Penfield or SEQ X amount of times at this time during the day. And it's important stuff to know. You might not care, but it still gets pulled from your chart. So having that information accurate helps out a lot.
I'm offended by
It's
this.
funny because all the BLS auditors are here, and there are 2, 3 and a half, 4 ALS auditors. I say half. It's okay. So we're not jerks. They're really nice people. So there's 2 parts to QA, QI, obviously, quality assurance and quality improvement. So the first part, I mean, we have standards. There's a set way of doing things, so we have to make sure that we follow those standards and that they're done in an appropriate way. It's not witch hunting, as some people might think that the QA program is. It's not, I hate Jimmy, so therefore I'm going to flag Jimmy for mundane stuff. It's to help you have consistency and quality across the room. And that's kind of the reason why we are doing this presentation. It's not just EMS charts. They're like, here, A through Z. This is EMS charts from page 1 to page 9, which we will do, but not as horrible as it sounds. But the QA program is kind of what brought up these issues, and it's working. I think it's working, and that last slide there, we're here to help, we're not here to hinder. Hopefully you're seeing an improvement. If not, you're having both partners sign the charts now. Yeah? So you're nudging your partner saying, hey, sign the chart, and then it gets signed. So now Neil doesn't breathe down your throat. And then improvement. So it's assurance is in a continuing effort, and then QI is a quality improvement, and it's just supporting providers to better their documentation. So a quick overview of what the process is like. Apparently I have this wrong. Cody pointed it out last class, and I never got around to changing it. But forget the numbers. It goes Neil, who does the billing, Joe and Alex, billing. So it's usually page 1, page 9, and then page 1.5, which is the patient page. So that way you have everything on those pages correct. S2, I know for a fact is correct because that is BLS. That's every single BLS call, and then BLS sign-offs. Or a BLS field term, because those exist. And then S4, or S3, S2 is BLS, S3 is ALS, all the ALS calls. I think this is where it gets mixed up. I don't know if S4 is the clinical care manager.
S4 is just me.
Right. And then S5 is Cody.
Correct.
Right, not the medical director. And then like S7 is the medical director, or R7.
R9.
There's a bunch of R's and S's in there. So it pretty much goes S1, which is billing, BLS, ALS, Beth, Cody, medical director. And there used to be another person that did billing, but they still look at that, right? that lady, I forgot her name.
She's on all the
She looks at
charts.
it in the very beginning,
Yeah.
like when Neil's looking at, she looks at it pretty much the next day.
Right.
So-
Her name's always in the chart on it.
Millis at the billing company.
Yeah, okay.
One thing though, S2 and S3, it's not completely a step ladder, it goes to
Yeah.
S2 or S3.
Right. I could change that. And then I added in here, it's not on the actual slide here, but I want to add it really quick. Appropriate responses to flags. So if you get flagged by, say, Jordan, responding with a period isn't appropriate. Is that kind of understood across the board? Say Jordan flags me and says, hey Adam, you forgot to sign the chart. And I say, all caps, what are you talking about, you jerk? I did sign this, you're stupid. Is that an appropriate flag? The lack of response is concerning.
No.
Is it an
No, it's
appropriate
not.
flag? Thank you. Okay, cool. Now, say Jordan flags me for something like, oh, hey Adam, did you consider immobilizing this patient? And I say, no, however, blah, blah, blah. Not really blah, 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 but I explain my rationale. I say, this is the reason why I didn't, and then, hunky-dory, everyone's happy. I didn't violate protocol, but I, may have considered it. It didn't really meet protocol. Is that an appropriate response?
Yeah.
Okay. And then talking about how to, really quick, the mode in which you respond to flags. So if a person asks you, an auditor asks you, hey, can you please add an addendum? Don't email respond, which kind of falls on us saying like, how would you prefer the person to respond? And it gives us an option. It says email, addendum, or special report. And then you can select which one. So it's kind of on us that if we flag you as auditors and you respond with whatever automatically, most people flag with email or respond with email because it's the first thing that goes through, I guess.
The reason we don't force, because yes, an auditor can say, select addendum, but then that's the only way that you can respond. And it's not really fair to you being the writer, because if you don't understand what, say, Melanie wrote, then you're forced to write this addendum and you don't know what Melanie wants. So now you have to go back, and you have to email her, you have to track her down.
Well, if you write down in the flag what you want them to write in the addendum, and then you force them to respond with an addendum, I think that would be appropriate.
We were having a lot of problems with that, because they'd be like, well, I don't understand, I did write that. So they needed to
Okay.
be able to have.
You want to have that open
But
dialogue.
what if the auditor missed something?
Sure. No, okay.
Jordan would have
All right.
horrible chart.
I just had it in my head that if I asked Jimmy to write an addendum, they would force him to write an addendum, because there's sometimes when we ask people to write addendums and
They don't
they don't
write
get
it.
written. It's just an email response saying, okay, or okay, I'll write it, and then they forget.
Or they write it in that email response.
Right, they write their
Thinking that-
addendum in their email response.
Then it's really the QA auditor's job to go back and say, that's perfect, write it down.
Copy that.
The reason being that if it was ever to be subpoenaed, it wouldn't go, the QA flag wouldn't go with the story.
True, no, and that's why I feel like if you force them to write,
It's gotta be part of the record.
right, yeah, I get it. So regardless, we're just gonna get it through your heads that when you get a flag, be cognizant of what they want you to write. Whether it be a special report, an addendum, or just talk about it through email. All right, so really quick, this is really the meat and potatoes of this presentation. So we talked about the why, the what. Now let's talk about the how. So there's two ways to write a chart. So when you write a chart, at the end of your chart writing experience, this is how you should look, right? Yeah. Or, you're having a bad day, this is not the way you should look. And computers are kind of
That's
expensive.
nighttime.
Is that what happens at night?
Yeah, Jimmy, it's loud.
Okay, so page one, really quick. I feel like I shouldn't have to say this to you. All right. Chip, can you see that?
You want me to read the number?
Oh, no, I'm just saying, can you see it? Because I can blow it up. If you can't see it. Well, so what would the run number for this chart be, Chip? Can you see that now? Is that cool?
Yes.
Okay, so what if in my little run number box on page one, right at the tippy top, utilizing my times from the computer.
Would be 002115.
Nope. So the red number gets written as such. What am I doing here? So you chop off the zeros because there are only 4 possible numbers that we could have in a run number. If we break 10,000, then yippee, we'll go over to the next placeholder. But for the most part, it's 16, which is the year. That always stays the same. And then the last 4 digits, which is 2115 in this case. So right up top on your page 1 right here, you would write 16, 2115. That'd be your run number. Straightforward, yes, easy. What's your incident history number on this, in this case? Let's go with Doug. Hold on a second.
0880.
Perfect. Do you write the whole number? 16, 13, 90, 880 on that box up there?
Never tried it.
So the correct answer is no. You can try it, but it won't let you. So this page here, if I'm on an ambulance with Mel, what's this box here going to be?
Awesome.
ALS.
Oh.
Right. If Jordan and Jimmy are on an ambulance together, what box does this become?
ALS physician.
ALS wannabes.
So you're gonna be the paramedic?
No, I'm kidding.
Basic.
Thank you, basic, BLS. The highest level of care gets reflected in that box right there. Now, the quicker we get through this, the less chatty, the quicker we can get through this. So say everyone's on a call, it's horribly busy, and the call comes in and we give it to Henrietta. And someone comes back and says, oh look, we have a mutual aid chart. On your unit, what are you gonna write?
Mutual aid.
Mutual aid, as it says right here. A lot of people didn't know that last question. A lot of people apparently, because we don't do it that often, or when a mutual aid chart does happen, it's one person that writes it. It's because it's there. And it's usually opposite that does it because we forget about it. So that exists. So EMD codes is the next spot right here. If there were instructions given, if there weren't instructions given, a lot of people had some confusions about that. What do you guys think is it correct?
Usually after it goes through 911, instructions are given.
Yes.
Yeah, there you go. So if there's an EMD code associated with the chart, or I'm sorry, the call, then most likely there are instructions given. A lot of people felt like, were there aspirin instructions given, were there CPR instructions given, like specific instructions to the caller, that's what they thought, that's what it was. So it says yes, unknown, most likely yes, because there's an EMD code. The EMD code is shown on your, yes?
Sorry, just to back up on the mutual aid thing. So that's talking about if we get mutual aided to another agency. Does that ever get changed
No.
if someone mutual aids into us?
That's what the mutual aid is for.
Yeah, so if we gave a call away to someone else, that call became a mutual aid call for another agency, that unit goes to mutual aid.
Right, but it's not like if we mutual aid into somewhere.
No,
we're
because you're
putting
still
our
on that
number.
truck
Yes.
or a flight card. So yeah, EMD code, type of service. This is where the, you know, if the call is in Brighton, it's seen. Now, if we go into another agency, that's the service is mutual aid. And then, of course, standby is first stand.
Hey, watch what you're doing with that laser pointer.
I'm sorry. Now, this is another part that a lot of people get caught up on is patient category is dispatched as. Really quick, I'm going to skip down to this part right here. Dispatched as correlates to your EMD code. There is no other way that you can get something different down here in your dispatched as opposed to your EMD code. Sometimes people misclick. It's okay. It happens. You know, it goes from the 33 job card, which is doctor's office, to 34, which is pandemic, epidemic, something ridiculous like that. So it's okay. It happens. But this is the one that's kind of more important to me. That it's the patient category. What category does that patient fit into? A lot of people don't find it in there, and they just pick general illness because they don't know what your patient really fits under, which really, what is this gonna affect? Like, it goes to court, like, you put down, Hardy, you put down patient category as general illness when really this was a chest pain patient. Like, I don't know if that's gonna really affect anyone in the long run. It just makes your chart look more complete, and it kind of adds more information. There aren't a lot of stuff, selections in there that are really that explanatory, that give you a lot of more information of what's going on. Yeah? But the distinction's there, right? That's the point we're trying to drive home, is that you know the difference between patient category and dispatch status.
Adam, what if they conflict some? So say it comes in as like a 6 delta for like, I don't know, the EMT.
Someone fell.
Or no, say this, let's use a respiratory. Like
Okay.
the call taker went through the card, and the
Yeah.
person said, oh, they gasped blood, so immediately
Yeah.
respiratory distress, and you get there and it's just like, this person's perfectly fine. And,
Right.
And you make it a general illness because there's nothing else that fits, but it's dispatched as a 6 delta. How's that gonna look? I mean.
It's gonna look as a 6, breathing
Right,
problems.
but is that gonna look bad on the chart that you said it was a?
Because it happens all the time.
Okay.
You know, we had a fall the other day that ended up being like, I don't know, this was a couple months ago, it ended up being a bad respiratory. So it's a 17 job card, but the patient category goes under respiratory. Even if they contradict, it's okay. That's just the way downtown works. They're imperfect. And we have to deal with it. So the outcome, this part, most of us don't have a problem with. Treated, transported BLS, treated, transported ALS. Patient treated, refused care, signed off ALS, and then vice versa, BLS. That's pretty straightforward. The thing that a lot of people have problems with is the no crew available, which is the outcome that you need to select when you're mutuating a call away. The DOAs, because it's age dependent now, above 65, equal to or above 65 or below 65. And then there's one where it's released to BLS. That's the one that I've seen the most, when it's really not applicable. So say I take a call with Jordan and I release the call to Jordan, and for some unknown reason Jordan says release the BLS because he's having an off day that day or something. What in reality does that what does that bring to mind when I say release to BLS?
You responded on a flag card and released it to me on a BLS ambulance.
Okay, you can do that. And interagency, no, because it would still be off the same run card.
Well,
but let's say, for example,
Usually-
I'm in SEQ and Jordan and Jimmy are on a basic truck in Brighton, so I come into Brighton and I say, patient's basic, and then they take off on their own. I gotta still write a chart. And then say you're on a flight car here and it happens when you go out to Penfield and you say no, I guess that's where you would say release to BLS.
Makes sense.
It's a very small percentage of when that actually happens, but interagency, and we all know what I mean by inner, like within our own agency, shouldn't be selecting that. There was one weird one where it said ALS transport with ALS assist. And I guess you could select that for a call, you call for a second tech on, but it still should be written as treated, transported ALS, and then in your activity log, you write down that second paramedic. It would be if you went to another agency and you wrote in with them, or another agency's paramedic came in to Brighton and you wrote in with them, because they would technically still have to write a chart on that patient too. Make sense?
So if an SEQ tech rides with us on a double basic truck, then what?
You write down treated, transported with other ALS on board. There's an option for that. That's a choice. Here. I will go as far as,
It just used to be, but I'm pretty sure.
yeah,
Yeah, I just used it yesterday.
yeah. Just so we can go through this really quick. Ooh. I got one.
Ooh.
Which doesn't make sense because there's also, hold on. Is it down too low? Here. Treated, transported ALS, other ALS agency on board.
Well, actually, it does kind of make sense, because the ALS assist with an ALS ambulance would be I was on a fly car and Henrietta called me in. I am the ALS assist with the ALS ambulance.
Right.
Or if I go into Pittsburgh and I'm the ALS assist with the BLS ambulance. When we get down lower, that's when we have someone else ride on our ambulance.
And they come in with us. Yeah.
The transport being the key possibility.
Yeah.
And the truth is, you can always ask a QA operator there. I actually called Neil the other day and said, you know, I had to, I was going into another agency, but it got canceled, but then it was their call, but then, you know, it was all these weird
Yeah.
qualifications.
I feel like we're beating a dead horse. I just want to make it clear that there are a bunch of things in here that some people would like, oh, I think this fits, and then you select it. If it doesn't make sense to you, you most likely shouldn't be selecting it. You should be selecting the stuff that you're used to, like treated transported BLS, or treated transported ALS, for your run-of-the-mill calls. If you're really confused, just ask somebody. I don't expect anyone to memorize all this stuff down pat. Just the big stuff that you should know. And then, when it loads up here, crew members. On this side here, P stands for
Primary.
D stands for
Driver.
and then S,
Secondary.
T, tertiary, third. T doesn't stand for trainee, S doesn't stand for student, P doesn't stand for paramedic, it's primary, driver, secondary, tertiary, or third. When you denote student, trainee, trainer, up here, even though it says preceptor student, student is also trainee. So don't come up to somebody and say, well, they're not a student. Well, yeah, they kind of are, but they're a trainee. That's where it gets denoted as preceptor student. Just the distinction there. Say Tyler is on with me when, and Jordan, and I put Tyler's name in here. What would this letter go to?
S.
S, or secondary. And then all of a sudden, Shauna shows up too.
T.
T, right? But Tyler writes the chart. What's his letter change to?
P.
P. Everyone get that? Who writes the chart? The
P.
primary. Okay.
Even if it's a training.
Yes, even if it's training. There you go. Good catch. This part, pretty straightforward. I'm just going to drive this home because Neil likes to harp on it. There's a big reason for this. It's just to make sure it's in the right part of town. That's all it is. And if you're confused, look it up on Google Maps. Neil also did print out those lovely zip code charts behind all the computers.
Well, the problem with those is nobody
Can't
can
see
really tell what actual
Sure,
area they
yeah.
are.
Splits.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's like, I mean, it would be a little better if it was a little bigger where you could see like just the
The
main
line.
roads.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that look at it and go, well, I kind of think it's right here, so I'm gonna.
Yeah. Or just type in the address in Google Maps and it usually pops up. That's what I usually do. And it's usually accurate for the most part. But I still get confused about Hagen. The intersection of Hagen and 441 is 14610. However, when you get into Hagen Drive, it's 14625.
Well,
Why?
Brickstone's the same way.
Yeah.
Half of Brickstone is 180,
20.
the other half is 20.
Right. Next part, it's my personal pet peeve. I don't know if it's any of the other auditors, but I feel like we've been going right to the hospital a lot lately. Really, we haven't. So I pretty much guarantee you didn't go red with an abdominal pain patient. Just make sure you have the correct one. For statistics, it would make sense that if you start off red and you get downgraded, put that down there. Just be honest. But if you went red the entire time, then put that down. Or if you didn't, no license signs. But when you're going to the hospital, it's a big distinction. Because when I woke up and I'm looking at page 1, I'm like, oh wow, they went red? Ooh, okay, this must be a good call. And then I look at the rest of it, it's like, abdominal pain, vitals are perfectly stable. Okay, and it's most likely a mistake. Anyone questions about that? So the comment section here, I usually write where the patient ended up bed-wise. Some people write why they went to the hospital, or that specific hospital, even though there's a destination basis there. That's just room for you to elaborate if you do so wish to put it in there. Anyone else write anything different from the stuff that I mentioned? Right, okay. Or leave it blank. Doesn't need to be filled out. Yeah, it's happened a few times. I'm sure you guys are used to it because, you know, you take a call at 11:50 and then you call back in service at 1 and then you have 2 different days to deal with. And then EMS charts doesn't really, play along with you. It happens.
It won't let you lock.
Actually, it has let you lock it before.
Yeah.
I mean,
Won't let me lock.
yeah. Because it's still technically chronological.
EMS.
Right. Just make sure, just be cognizant. Majority of the time it'll work out fine. Now, I was told this is wrong. We're not supposed to, it doesn't make a big difference. However, Neil said yes. I asked him to elaborate. He said Medicaid.
Medicaid.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna leave it up to writing the full, just in case. If you write the single, I could imagine someone saying something like, that's not true. Brand new ambulance, that's not possible. Just write the whole down to reading. It's a simple, spell it out, write it out, that's it. Okay, this page really quick here. I keep on saying really quick. Big stuff. The name, right? The name, last name. I get it, mistakes happen. Personal story. Went to a code in the city, worked the entire code, transported, get to the hospital, registration's like name, and I'm like, good question. Forgot. So I put down John Doe, and I never got talked to. I'm assuming here, circumstances, be a little bit more cognizant, we're better than that. Phone number. Primary care is a good thing to get as well. If you can't, or if they're unconscious, that's fine. Extenuating circumstance. It just makes billing easier. And then emergency contact or next of kin for, that comes up in the line here. Easier for minors. So we have someone to talk to. Even though it's not really new, the residency box is here now, not here. Right? Make sure it won't let you lock the chart if you don't select it. Yes?
When you do the search for the patient.
Yep.
And get two names, the
Yeah.
names come up, it's the same person.
Sure.
Which one's gonna be, the one on top's gonna be the most current one?
So
Which
if
one's the best one?
on the page that pops up, all the way to the right is last transported date. It actually shows you the date that they were last taken to the hospital. So there's two Jordan Sanowskis, for example. And it's got a date from 4 years ago, and it's got a date from yesterday. Which one would you pick? You'd probably pick the one from yesterday because it's probably the most current. We'll get to that in the next page here. But yeah, probably the most current. And then you pull it up and it's blank, then you should be like, okay, maybe I'll pick the other one. Because that's happened a few times too. There's some duplicates out there that they're not good. Or just fill it out brand new. It's probably going to be easier that way.
I have a couple things to
Yeah.
add on that, maybe. Employer, if it's gonna be workers' comp, is good to get. And then you should always have a wait for all pediatrics. Pediatrics should always have a wait there.
Why is that?
Wait based on medications.
Yeah.
Most medications for pediatrics are wait based.
Okay.
Straightforward, easy.
Remember to change that weight though, next time you take a minute.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
6 months old.
If you take a patient to the hospital or do anything where a HIPAA form was signed, what is this box going to say?
Yes.
Should never say no. Unless you're writing a cancel or a mutual aid. This one, never figured out what that says. Don't fill it out. So PCS, that'll come up later.
So the prior authorization payer, is that what you were?
Yeah. Do we know what that is?
Yeah,
I tried asking Neil, he said no.
Well, no, we used to use that at Figure Lakes when we use EMS charts.
Uh-huh.
If you've got a Medicaid transfer and
Okay.
it's not an emergency transfer out of a hospital to a nursing home, hospital, or residence, they need to get prior approval through Medicaid, otherwise we don't get paid for it. So if they have a prior approval payer, they will, the drop down will be there and it'll say yes, approved by your prior approval
Okay.
number, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't need to worry about that here.
Yeah,
but in a-
which is why I never got a straight answer, which I
But there are
think
several insurance companies coming into the area that have started asking
for prior
for
approval.
prior approval.
So, if you have a PCS form filled out by a physician, or a mid-level, or a nurse, which is acceptable, this needs to be hit yes. What are some scenarios why we need to fill out PCS forms really quick?
Correct.
Direct admit, yep.
How often does that happen? I never filled in mine.
The cath lab
Cath
stuff,
labs
yeah.
more, and then you have those random doctors up at the Hagens, they go directly to MOU.
Cardiologist.
Yeah.
Like, so a cardiologist's office to the cath lab, not like a patient on the side of the road.
Yeah.
Unless their physician happens to be right there with them.
That's right.
Right.
What's
One
that
patient
like?
is his own physician, the cath
Yeah.
lab, the guy set his own cath up, and we're like, okay.
So you gotta make sure it's
Go.
signed by the correct person, that the reason is legible and it makes sense. Most of the time it's because they need cardiac or hemodynamic monitoring, which is a catch-all. So yeah, that's gonna hit yes, and then the next page, we'll talk about the specific things with the PCS here. So, really quick with the PCS stuff, and then I'll go over here with the CMS codes. The form assigned, the reason, which should correlate to what the sheet says, the provider type, and then their first name, last name. Mileage, some people say yes, that you need to write down, so that way they can be like, well, you passed by the hospital to go to this hospital. If you have a PCS form signed by a physician or anyone, I don't know how that's gonna make a difference. They have a doctor saying, take this patient over here, that form says so, you're okay, as long as it's filled out right. And then make sure you have it scanned and appropriately labeled and attached to your chart. Now, CMS codes. When you transport a patient, this one needs to be selected. Don't have to have this one selected, don't have to have that one selected. If you sign one off, don't have to have any of them selected. It's only for transports. Now, like I said with the catch-all, if you don't find one that fits your patient category or criteria, you can do cardiac or hemodynamic monitoring required, which is blood pressure or cardiac monitoring. We do that on all patients. They go ALS pretty much, so that catches it all. And then same thing with the BLS. If you can't find one for BLS, you can write down the one that's the third party or attendant required. That's the old school oxygen attendant. Still counts. Billing companies look at it and they say, cool, that looks good.
For PCS, they gotta make sure they're the same though.
Yeah, yeah. So to backtrack, whatever is on the form, it should be clicked here and it should also be clicked here. They should also match up. But I feel like that's super self-explanatory. So recap here. Nope. Questions, comments, concerns about that?
I don't like some of the options because
they suck.
It could be abdominal pain and it says ALS next to it, but it's not a ALS.
So that is the maximum level at which insurance will reimburse the company for. So if it says ALS pain, it means that you can bill up to an ALS level with that CMS condition code. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's what the level of care was. That's what insurance will reimburse the company for.
Yeah.
So if we have something, we take ALS, and the code only says BLS, the insurance will only reimburse the company for the BLS level transport.
So at BLS level, should we check that as, or
No,
so say with BLS code?
It doesn't really matter. If it's a BLS level call and the only code that matches it is ALS, so they'll still bill it out at the BLS level. Yeah. But they will pay up to an ALS level for that. So like a stub toe will take, I don't think that's on there, but a stub toe, they will only pay BLS. Now I find that it is a patient that has amputated that toe when they stubbed it, and the amputation's not on there, but stub toe is, they'll only pay me for an ALS level, even if I gave, I RSI'd the patient and gave them, 6 narcotics on the way, they're only gonna pay us at the BLS transport level. So that's what those CMS, BLS, ALS are for. It doesn't necessarily mean that only ALS can use this.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. That's good information. Thanks, Tyler. And I think it was a couple months ago that Beth had met with the billing lady and said sometimes they don't even look at it right. It's like slowly getting phased out.
Our newer billing companies much better about looking at the entire call.
Not so much just making sure specific tick boxes are marked, which is the bane of all our existences. Like I said, kind of flip-flop. Sometimes you can't read a handwriting, try your best. Or when you're at, talking with the physician, hopefully they're giving you a report and that physician that signed it is there. That sometimes hasn't happened. Just talk to them, say, hey, what's your name? Write it down really quick. If they give you a hard time, call a supervisor. This next page, it is self-explanatory, you would think, right? Mm-hmm. However, that's annoying.
Yeah, that's lazy.
That's super annoying too. And I feel like when Doug brought up the point of like, I search for a patient, I find said patient, and I look at their meds, I'm like, cool, great, they're all there. Don't have to look at them again. Wrong. If they have med lists with them, or if you don't think that they're accurate, just cross-reference them. Just look at them and say, yes, they're the same. Perfect. Maybe they're off one, maybe they're on a new one. It's supposed to be up to date and complete. Anyone have problems with writing down C attached?
What if you do attach it?
If you do attach it and you print out the chart, it only gets attached to the, it doesn't print out all the 12 leads, all the stuff that's attached with the HIPAA form. You have to go in there and specifically print it out and attach it to the chart. So if I say, I'm going to look at your chart, so I'm going to print it out in blackout form or whatever, and I look at your meds and it says see attached, and I'm like, I don't see them because they're not attached. I'd have to go back, look through. It's just one extra step. But if you put them all there, they're going to be listed there anyways. And then the comma's annoying too. It's just going across, and sometimes they disappear. Questions? Cool. All right, 2. Okay. These 2 boxes sometimes catch people out. Symptoms are things people are experiencing. I feel like I'm reading verbatim, but I feel like I have to. Impressions is what you think is going on, right? Is that confusing to anybody? Is that hand raised, Susan? You have a question? Okay. Sometimes they can be changed. Sometimes they like match right up, like seizure, or like convulsion seizure, or breathing problems, respiratory, and then on the impression it's like dyspnea on exertion, CHF. Like, it's all respiratory. If you want to figure out exactly what it is, then go for it. But if it's respiratory, it's respiratory. I feel like sometimes this hinders us. It makes it look kind of bad. This is where you can use your own words. So if the symptoms or impressions don't work for you and you pick whatever, then chief complaint, just write down, I'm having shortness of breath, if that's what the patient's saying, or I'm unconscious. Hopefully don't say that. They're unconscious. Don't write a whole long thing. A couple words, easy. We're all veteran chart writers in here, so I don't have to write this out. Priority 1, 2, and 3. 3 is no longer BLS red. It's been years since 3s have switched over. So all 3s are ALS addendum required. And you should be doing ALS assessments because sometimes 3s get coded with like really bad, like seizure, like continuous seizure. It's a priority 3. Or like these doctor's offices that call for kind of serious complaints and it's coded at a 3. So sometimes they they get transported ALS, but sometimes they don't. So you should still write one. Okay, so this part. Big portion of your chart, right? So it should be from the start of your chart, or your start of your patient care. I'm sorry, not start of your patient care. From the time they called the ambulance back, right? So whatever happened, you want to know exactly what happened to the point where they called the ambulance. Not, you arrived to find blah, blah, blah in your HPI. No assessments. Don't put vitals in there. Inappropriate. Yes, Ted.
Well, I treat that as the subjective area.
Exactly.
Is that what we're
Well, yeah, you could,
Okay.
so a lot of people have, disclaimer, everyone has their own definition for certain spots, like what needs to go where. For example, the next page, we're gonna talk about scene description. A lot of people have their own definition of what needs to go there. However, we have a set criteria of minimum requirement, and then there's also stuff that if you put in there, it's gonna go elsewhere. Don't waste your time by putting it in there, because you can go put it somewhere else. So a lot of people, I don't wanna generalize, but I came from Metro. At Metro, it was very HPI narrative. You wrote your whole SOBI form in there. And some people will try to do that in your HPI. It's fine, it's okay, but I feel like you're just taking up a lot of space where that stuff can go elsewhere more appropriately, making your chart look a lot better. So your HPI, the way that I like to put it in my head is whatever's happening, give them a story, write down a story of what happened up until they called 911. So usually my HPIs end with, patient called 911, wife called 911, blah, 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 911. And then after that I write down some pertinent negatives. And I see that in a lot of people's charts, and I'm sure other auditors could agree. But putting pertinent negatives in your chart rules out a lot of stuff that right from reading it, you're like, okay, cool. They never had any of these things. And it's like nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, travel, when we were worrying about that. I do the big criteria stuff like chest pain, loss of consciousness, trouble breathing. Some people might argue that those are assessments. Sure, but they're separate from your HPI. It doesn't correlate to like, you know, you rate your HPI, you write a story like patient developed chest pain this morning, they call them a 1. We arrived and then we found, and then you start rating that in your HPI. That can go elsewhere. It works elsewhere. I don't think it works in there. Yes,
Bananas.
It's oranges.
Oranges. Questions about the HPI? Putting how you move the patient is also inappropriate. There's other places for that, like your activity log. So on the bottom, they are kind of annoying. A lot of people forget them. But for those of you who can't see, additional injury details, cardiac arrest in the motor vehicle. Also the top 2 boxes right here, injury versus non-injury. If you select injury, it selects a whole slew of other things in your nemesis stuff that makes you say certain things. Does that make sense? That doesn't make sense. You select injury. If you try to close your chart without having certain things selected, it won't let you try to close your chart. And if it's not injury, it'll be like, cool, you're good, whatever. Which brings us to the other tabs. Right? Really quick, the MVC one. Some people like to write down car information here. I think that's okay. Some people like to write it in their scene description. That is also okay, as long as it's in there somewhere. Some people don't look here as often, right? Questions about this page? This one, ALS text in the room. I've never seen one written poorly. It's checkboxes. But if you go on a code and you don't write one, I think that's poor. So make sure you have this tab filled out. And then grandma falls down, hurts her ankle. This one, and you click your nemesis criteria, hit find, and then you try to click the checkbox and it doesn't select, and you're like, maybe it froze, and you try to click another one, then you have 5 of them selected in a row. Yeah, everyone experienced that?
Oh, yeah.
So make sure you have the correct one. There's a billion in there, but
I fell from
general-
space, yeah.
Right.
I like to use that one all the time.
Right, but this nemesis, this all holier than thou nemesis, it's the criteria that your patient fits into. It's all about statistics. Questions on this? Okay. Scene description. Again, not the place for vitals or assessments. Some people also add, I've seen, like, scene description is literally your first impression, and it includes the alertness or first impression of your patient. That's okay. Just don't elaborate. Don't go crazy with it. If it gives me a story of like the weather, where the patient was found, who else was there on scene, just a pretty blunt description. Also conditions of how you found the patient. Were they covered in garbage? Oops. Is it unsafe? Stuff like that. Right? This next line here. Well, actually, we got to make sure our New York location code is selected. Brighton, if you're not in Brighton, select the appropriate town. It won't let you lock the chart if you don't select one. Patient belongings. There's 2 parts to this part. If you read here, so you say you picked up grandma's cane, you jammed it in the back of 8-9, then you forgot it, and then they call later saying, "Where's my cane?" And then you argue, "I left it with you." We can look at the chart and say, "Oh wait, they never said they left it with them in the activity log," and they look at 8-9 and it's there. Some people do actually leave the cane. They just never write in their chart. It's like a peace of mind, just to say like, we did actually leave it with the patient. We have proof. Here is it in the chart. You're crazy. So this page applies to everybody, not just ALS text, not just BLS text, everybody. I'm going to emphasize the word initial. A lot of people have a confusion as between like, well, their GCS improved. They were a seizure patient. They went from GCS of, confused to 15, right? It says initial there. You can document changes in the activity log. Easy. Same thing with level of consciousness. Your neuro assessment also. Sometimes it doesn't leave a lot of space. You know, because writing down CAO times 4, patient able to answer questions, blah, blah, blah. Fine, but when you find specific findings and your neurologic tab doesn't include the things you find, like, is pronator drift in there? There's one Cincinnati that doesn't fit in there. But words are better than tick boxes, I feel like. You're able to explain yourself easier, so elaborate. Do whatever you want in that box. If you didn't do a neurological assessment on an unconscious patient, because they wouldn't say you can't teach an old dog new tricks back to you because they're unconscious, there's one box in here that says not checked, that's fine. That's okay. If you didn't do one, you didn't do one. Just make sure you do one when it's appropriate. That's a care issue. Some people, a lot of people forget about this. Were they immobilized? Make sure, yes, if they were. If they weren't, it obviously stays no. And then loss of consciousness. I myself sometimes forget. Did they lose consciousness? Did they not lose consciousness? Did you not know if they lost consciousness? Put it there. This is a very easy page for you to contradict yourself later in your chart. Simply based on things that change. Things change. Patients change. Okay?
Adam?
Yes.
Patient this was all initial, right? This is before you treated them.
Oh, no. What did I do? No.
Well, before you treated, but when you're
But
there.
when you do it, like, what was patient immobilized? I read that as, were they immobilized?
Did you?
When you got
Yeah,
this was your initial
right, because you can go down here and say, you know, secured by tube, right? You can put your own tube in here too. I see people do that sometimes as well. I think as long as it's consistent.
There used to be a box that would pop up that said PTA. Does that pop up if you hit yes, immobilized now? Okay, they must have
No,
removed it.
because as far as I'm concerned, if
Wouldn't that go
they.
like your activity log? I mean, that's what.
Yeah.
Sure,
Like you
yeah, same
say-
thing with this, but that's why I
This is
feel like
your
it's not as
initial.
important. I think it's like, because, correct me if I'm wrong, Beth, there's certain spots on this page that you can make appear and make disappear. Like you can call EMS and say, hey, I want this here.
Some things you can, I don't think you can take that out.
Right, it's always there. So,
It used to pop up like Mel said prior
Yeah.
to that one.
it says yes or no or unknown for loss of consciousness, but for immobilized, also the airway. 9 times out of 10 it's gonna be patent, but for those patients who you do intubate, I think it's okay for you to write your information there. However, a more appropriate spot for you to put that information would be in your activity log. But I don't know if it'll be any detriment to write that in here.
I always thought that wasn't secured when you got to them, so we're
Correct.
coming out of a, like a
Well, yeah, you
surgical
would, yeah,
center.
you could write that down too.
Okay.
Yeah. I would hope that you would elaborate as to how that tube got secured, whether it was from you or, you know, because it's vague, but use your words to make it specific. Are we okay with this page? Page 4, this is also an everybody page. Same thing, initial, temp. We have temp thermometers on the trucks. If you check the temp on the way to the hospital, you write it here. I feel like if you check the temp at the hospital too, you can write this in here as well. But write down in the comments, you can say check temperature at the hospital, in triage. And some people write it in their activity log, perfectly fine. You can say temp at triage, blah, blah, blah. As long as it's explicitly written as to how you obtain that temp somewhere. Comments, you can elaborate as to, you know, the edema, was it, you know, +2 pitting isn't that very descriptive. You can say, you know, in the leg, or it's solely, like, mostly around the ankle, not so much calf. Straightforward on that one too? Okay. Okay. There's a lot on this page here. The body's making a comeback. I know it sucks, but we might be moving towards that. However, if you do EMS mobile, EMS starts mobile, continue with the body. Some people like it, some people don't. But if you do it normally, use this. Now, no abnormalities noted. No bueno. Also defaults, you can't click that anymore. We know that as well. No blanks. I feel like leaving blanks just tells me you didn't do it. We should be doing full assessments all the time. I hate this word. A lot of people use normal. If you tell me what normal is, I feel like, you know, we learned this in basic school, like, don't use normal. But for some reason, we tend to levitate towards the word normal. I'm pretty sure Satan beat it. Here's some options. You can read them at your leisure. Simple words like the airways clear, the big stuff in each body system that you look at. No obvious signs of trauma. Some people write NCAT, which stands for
Neurocephaly.
Neurocephaly.
If we don't know what it means, then why are we?
Yeah, where I know what it means. It means everything's normal.
Oh, thanks, Kurt. Normal. It is, because it's funny, because the N is actually normal cephalic.
Yeah, right.
What's normal? I guess we could beat it till the cows come home too, but like, if it looks abnormal, write it. You're like, hey, they have bruising here. Their nose is broken. They have blood coming out of this part of their body. We should be able to write all this stuff down. But when I say no abnormalities noted, that kind of leads me to think, did you check everything? Did you look at every single aspect of that? Pulse, motor sensation.
Well, if you're doing a trauma assessment, then you're
Full,
supposed
no,
to.
yeah, for your run-of-the-mill grandma falls down,
So-
like hopefully you'd be doing that, right?
It's a
Yeah.
trauma assessment.
So write down with things you found. Not that I'm saying that you don't, Jimmy, I'm not singling you out. Don't think that I'm doing that, I'm just saying, this is acceptable. If you're doing it, keep it up. If you're not, try to be a little bit more specific. For the chest, things like the chest wall's intact, no signs of trauma. Notice how I say no signs of trauma or injury in a lot of these, because that's okay. You can say that. Now, if there was a sign of trauma or injury, you'd write that down. Right? Skin.
Now, can we go back to that?
Sure.
So you say to fill out every box, but
Yeah.
sometimes I put not check that if we got a psych patient, you're not gonna check their pelvis.
Yeah, then fill it. Don't leave
Oh,
it blank. Just say
okay.
you didn't check it.
Okay.
Now, say bowel sounds is the most common one.
Yeah.
If they're complaining of abdominal pain, I would hope you're doing an assessment that includes listening to bowel sounds. But if you're doing, something that doesn't involve the abdomen.
Do they,
But-
do they actually teach bowel sounds assessment in the BLS?
No, they
in the
don't.
BLS classes?
No?
They don't
Yes,
teach,
but it is required that it is 2 minutes of silent ambient
Yeah,
atmosphere.
yeah.
But
of two-
to actually
2 full minutes
assess
of assessment
is,
of the
yeah,
amount
true.
of the
So
bowel
either you hear bowel sounds or you
We
don't.
never
So
get.
we teach it, but we tell them that
It's
you're
just
not
present
going
during
to
that
find a
present.
time that's appropriate to do it because you're never gonna have 2 full minutes of silence in the back of an ambulance. So we teach them the general thought of that, but the truth of the matter is it's inappropriate to do on an ambulance.
Because you're hearing a lot of artifacts.
Because you're hearing a lot of artifacts, so you're not gonna be able to, you need, like I said, to do a true bowel sounds, you need 2 minutes of silence to determine are they hyperactive, are they hypoactive, or are they normal? And you need that silence to do it, because any erroneous noises that you hear in the atmosphere resonate in the abdomen.
See you all along.
And talk about
So the
bowel
answer is yes
sounds.
and no.
Because I know I didn't learn mine, and I mean,
The new curriculum
Thank
has
you.
it in it.
I don't ever assess bowel sounds. for that
So if
reason.
you don't assess bowel sounds, all I'm asking, what do you put in that box?
Not
assess.
checked.
But you're saying, I just wanted to know because you're saying that you should be assessing bowel sounds. I was
Sure.
never taught that.
If I hear bowel sounds, I guess,
That's why I was
the
asking.
perfect way of doing it, you can hear something. But, like, grandma hasn't gone to the bathroom in a week. At least attempt it, you could try. Maybe there's something else going on there. Now, you're not gonna actually hear bowel sounds. It could be other noises. This page doesn't get used a lot except for when we go from doctor's offices and they give a slew of meds, including propofol and all those crazy things. Having a good idea of how much they gave and what IV, cool. It makes your job a little bit easier just so you know. And then the hospital knows what they did, like before you even got there, what happened. Run-of-the-mill stuff like aspirin, perfect spot to put this. Nitro, perfect spot to put that. If the patient took their own med, pertinent to what's going on. So like I took 20 of fentanyl or morphine, like they have their own PO stuff. Yeah, if there you put, like I take my normal meds, don't put down normal meds down there, that's kind of inappropriate. But The IV is also important to us as auditors when you look at your activity log, and I don't see, I see you gave a liter of fluid, but I don't see an IV start, right? I don't see an action spot for an IV start, and you gave 1,000 cc's of fluid. Then I look back at page 7 and there's no IV. How'd you give the fluid? Where'd you give it through? Yeah, sure, did you make him drink the saline? That's gross. So if you tell me where you gave it through, then that makes my job a lot easier. Again, same as on page 1 where the tick boxes and you miss it by accident. The route in which you give meds. Sometimes that happens when you stick, what was it? Sublingual for nitro, and then right underneath it is subcutaneous. Try to give nitro subcutaneous and then get back to me and see how that worked out for you.
PI.
Okay, break. It's 8:30. We have like half an hour left. I feel like this is gonna really numb your brain.
It's just really hot
Keep
there.
going,
Is there a
keep
way to
going.
get some?
You can turn the fan back on, but
Keep
Barb
going.
can't.
Yeah, we got a half hour to go, let's just keep going. Yeah.
I just have to.
Oh.
Go ahead.
So, as important as the HPI was, this is literally the most important part of your chart. It is a story from the start to the end of what happened. There's a lot of places for you to screw up. There's a lot of places for you to put, misinformation, contradict yourself. Just a general idea of what needs to be included. We'll go into specifics on the next couple slides. Really on the wall here. Be detailed. If you have 2 lines for an entire transport, I feel like you really didn't spend a lot of time doing much of anything. Or you're just not really documenting appropriate stuff. I guarantee you more stuff happened than just 2 lines. So some of the stuff that you need to include, at least a timestamp for what time you were at the patient, and maybe a little note. How you got the patient onto the gurney, and then subsequently into the ambulance. I find it funny that on whatever page the HPI is on, 3, there's those tick boxes for stretcher, where it says to ambulance, off ambulance. There's an option for stair chair. When was the last time you unloaded someone from the ambulance via stair chair?
Never.
Never. I don't know why it's there. I think it's funny. When you transported, so let's say you went to the hospital, when you were triaged, I'm sorry, we skipped one. When you got to the hospital, when you were triaged, when you went to the bed, how you got your patient off the gurney onto the bed, and then all that stuff that happened in between, right? So there's a lot more stuff that happened in between. Because you checked vitals, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And for your ALS calls, a lot more stuff. And even for your BLS calls, bleeding control, immobilization, your crazy psych that you had to backboard.
Same.
All those things need to be documented and appropriately. Okay. All this stuff in between, really quick. Tyler,
Yes.
what's the appropriate way to document an IV start? You're writing a chart, you start an IV, how do you write it?
No, when I start, the way I document it is I pull it up on the drop-down activities, I pop it in there. IV access, I fill out all of that documentation, and then I write a little note that says, IV is established with good technique, good flash, good aspiration, good advancement, no swelling at the site, you can flush. You want to continue or
No,
stop?
you're good, thank
Okay.
you. I appreciate the insight, because that's the note part is really what I like. Because if you were to write an action line for an IV start, it's bare bones. If you write down no to your successfulness, that your IV wasn't successful, why not? Like, what happened? Did the patient reach up and slap you? Were did you miss? A lot of stuff can happen. And if something as simple as an IV start, there's a lot of risks involved to it too. I can sit here and talk about phlebitis and all this crazy stuff. We do them every day. Our documentation on them isn't that bad, but it could improve. But you need to include an action line with every IV start. ALS tech specifically. 12 lead, same thing. If you just write down 12 lead, because when you import it from your monitor, it'll still show up 12 lead, right? And you can be like, normal sinus rhythm, no SC segment elevations, blah, blah, blah. There still needs to be an intervention or action associated with that. Now, whether or not you write your interpretation in the action pop-up box or in the actual line in the activity log is fine. I actually write mine in the activity log, and then I fill out the action normal.
So it all shows up in the same line.
Yeah,
doesn't it?
yeah. I think it looks better. That's just personal preference, whatever. Same thing with med administration. Now, this one's a doozy, and I feel bad for the BLS techs, but even for BLS techs, I feel like this is something you guys should pay attention to. Vitals before and after any kind of med administration. Friday, was it Friday? Gave nitro. Patient's pressure tanked while we were sitting in triage. I took vitals before, they were great. I started taking them after, 5 minutes or so after. Granted, our transport times aren't that long, but get an idea of how, if anything changed at all. For my case, everything changed. Her heart rate went to the 20s, and luckily it happened in triage. But I wouldn't have known that had I not cycled my blood pressure after I gave him a pretty normal med that we give, nitro. Same thing with BLS techs. Mary is prescribed nitro. Jordan assists Mary in giving nitro, but doesn't recheck Mary's blood pressure. Mary passes out. Game over.
Sign off.
Right. Just having a general idea of what happened afterwards, especially with the big ones like narcotics. That's important. Yeah. And then not only vitals, but within vitals, how they feel, like your actual objective assessment, or subjective rather, subjective assessment of my pain isn't going away, I'm a baby, blah, blah, blah. This next one is twofold. If you go on a psych and you backboard somebody, this needs to have an immobilization action line filled out too, because you're technically immobilizing them, even though it's not for any specific spinal injury. And this has changed since our protocols have changed as well. If you still need to use a backboard, an option's there, but if you normally, spinal restriction immobilization protocol, just put the collar on, just select collar, and fill out what you wrote. That's it. A lot of questions came up as to whether or not, if we're not backboarding people, do we still need to fill out an action log? Of course you do, because you're still applying something. You're applying a collar. And then on top of that, sometimes you're putting them on a KD, short board, scoop stretcher, all that's in there. It needs to be documented. The position in which they get restrained, which arm goes up, which arm goes down, soft restraints, cravats, seat belts, good stuff to write. What's the word I'm looking for? Indication for what you're doing is important to write down as well. I don't want to, I feel like if you were to write a chart and then all of a sudden, second line in, you have your patient immobilized with no explanation as to why they became immobilized, I'd be a little, okay, were they crazy? Did you just jump the gun? There's more to this story. So, get rid of that gray area. Explain it explicitly. Bleeding, straightforward. Airway, also straightforward, minus ET tubes. Those are a little bit more involved. The pop-up box that pops up for ET tubes, more than enough information to add in there. If you failed one, write down how you failed it. If you tried twice and then someone else tried, write down what went down. Thought process as to your plan, your backup plan. Good airway technique. I feel like there's more stuff in that action box. Hospital notify, med control.
Changes after all this, after each intervention, there are changes?
Yeah.
If there's any changes?
I feel like I talked about it.
Did you?
I think so, yeah. If not, just to recap, you do something, something changes, write down what changed. The nitro story.
Even if it stayed the same.
Even if it stayed the same,
Right.
it's still good information to put
Right.
down. And it's not just with meds. I feel like, maybe that's what I didn't
That's what
explain. You backboard the patient like this, they remained calm, or they continued to fight, What happened, what changed? You bleeding, more stressing, more dressing, they're still bleeding, or they stopped bleeding. You did something happened, just write down what happened. Yes, Sean?
Also seeing people, sometimes people put kind of everything in one line, where it's like time of triage, placed in bed, gave report, signed patient, all in one line.
It's actually my next thing I was gonna
Oh,
talk
I
about.
was like, you said anything else? Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's okay. It is, and it's something else, that's true.
If BLS took in like 2 patients or even else, would you put it in this log so that you know that you're gonna have spaces for this patient
So if BLS took in 2 patients,
From a crash?
from a crash?
yeah.
So you're gonna have minutes of.
Oh, sure, yeah, you can elaborate. I mean, I'm hoping you're writing 2 separate charts.
Well, that's what I.
And then in
mean,
your
then
chart,
you're
you would
gonna have
say, took some time
spots.
to assess other patient, took some time to assess other patient. Perfectly fine.
You actually have to write that?
I
Like
could.
every block?
There's gonna be, no, there's gonna be a gap. And then so, like, for the most part, what I do, and I've seen this practice among of our other people that work here, if there's a huge gap, like you get on scene and it's like an hour before you transport because grandma can't make up her mind. There's, every 10 minutes or so, like just a little like, hey, a little update, we're still here. Grandma's can't make up her mind. And then you go back. Cause when I'm reading it, I'm thinking, okay, they're sitting there like, oh my God, make a decision. And or sometimes things happen really quickly and there's like line. I feel like a gap greater than 5 minutes, you gotta explain what's going on. Or you should have at least a timestamp every 5 minutes or 10 minutes for your stable patients. And if it's like you take more than 10 minutes because you're assessing another patient entirely, you can say, hey, took time to go talk to another patient that was in the back of ambulance. That's fine. And writing it once so that the reader knows, like, oh, Mary took 2 patients. Okay, that's fine. Does that answer your question? Okay. Include the following reassessment findings, especially after an intervention. Total amount of fluids given for those ALS techs out there. If you start a fluid bolus, we should be giving fluid boluses in either 250 or 500 portions. Check for lung sounds. Things that change. Did their pressure go up? Did it go down? Did it not change? And then how much fluid you gave at the end. Having a total number of cc's or liter bags. Hopefully that never happens. So we know how much you gave. So the hospital knows how much you gave too. Can anyone think of a scenario where that would be very important to know? CHF.
Dialysis.
Burns. Thank you. Burns is the one that I was going for. All valid points.
Sepsis.
Huh?
Sepsis.
Sepsis. Very important because those are, fluid resuscitation heavy calls would, you can get a lot of fluid in as much as we like, oh, I gave it 20, half a liter, right? Because we were 3 minutes away from the hospital. What if you're coming from Penfield and you're like 2 liter bags flowing full because the patient's pressure is crap? And then last, what Shauna said, to reiterate, don't lump too many things into one line. If you think it happened and then like 5 minutes went by and then another thing happened, write them separately. Don't lump them together. Okay, I feel like there's more to talk about that. Does anyone have any questions about the? I feel like I hit the, our big points. Is there questions? Comprehensive is the name of the game. Comprehensive and consistent. Yeah. Consistency. What I will do is I will print out handouts of this entire presentation, so that way if you ever feel, oh wait, I don't make this point, what do I have to write for this? You can reference to this, if you want. It's the thing. A lot of this stuff we already know, and it's just review. That was a disclaimer in the beginning. Now page 9. He loves this page. Page of destruction, I call it. So every call needs to have the audit filled out because there are some questions on here that pertain to whether or not stuff got broken, patients or you got broken. Did you try an RSI? Yes. Did you get controlled substances? Yes, no. Those sometimes correlate to specials. And then on the other side, the big one, signatures. Just sign the chart. I get it, sometimes people will forget. Sign the chart. We're now having everyone sign cancels too, because we can't sign all the charts. So to get people on top of their game, all crew members need to sign a chart. Okay? Now, specifics on the activity audit. I'm going to talk about this one first really quick. Operational stuff. This was introduced 6 months ago. It's been a while. We've been doing it well for the most part. If you really don't think your patient meets the medical necessity criteria, hit no. There are 2 laminated presentations, one in the computer room, one behind the dining table, on what constitutes things that are medically necessary. So if you have questions, consult those. If the paper doesn't answer your question, consult an auditor. But if you really don't think it fits, just say no, it's fine. And then the other 2 important things is how the patient was moved to the stretcher and how the patient was transferred off the stretcher. There isn't a scooch thing yet, but sheet transfer.
I've asked a few times.
Yeah.
It's annoying when they
They
scooch
just
anyway.
have to put not, then they'll go back.
Right. Now, clinical stuff, like I was talking about, the CS, intubation stuff, these most of the time connect to a special report. So if you hit yes to controlled substances, it forces you to fill out a special step. Beth knows you gave NERCs, Roundwick knows you gave NERCs. Was the code terminated? Did you do a field term? Things like that. This is stuff that people on the higher echelon needs to know about. And then a special gets generated. Questions about special reports? You know how to fill them out? If the person you want to send a special report to isn't included, there is a line to add somebody. Now let's talk about HIPAA forms really quick, and I think that's it. No, refusals. We still have to talk about refusals. I'm so sorry.
Bless you.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Now, George Washington went to the hospital. He's perfectly fine, right? He's consciously oriented. He's able to, sign consent. So I asked him, George, can you sign? And he signs. He also puts the date. That's the correct way. Now, section 2, George is confused, but his wife's there, Martha. I selected that she's the patient's legal guardian. She signs correct date and then writes her name out. That's the correct way. Now, this is the part where people get confused. What constitutes the correct form or way of filling out this form? If you're confused, read it. I hate to say that, but it's there. And if you're doing it wrong, then you're not reading it right. Some of the things that I've seen messed up are the dates, which makes mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes every so often. If you forget a date, how annoying is it to print out a HIPAA form, put the date in, rescan it, reattach it, because you forgot to put the date. So, you remember to write the date. And then titles. Jordan's not really an RN, but in this scenario, because George Washington went to Strong, and just the zip code is perfectly fine. Do we know that Strong has its own zip code?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we don't have to put the full address anymore?
Just the name of the hospital and the zip code is perfectly fine. And then the time. And we all know, where we can find that time. 14642, yeah. I'm sorry, it's not that big. Okay. Now, refusal forms, kind of the same idea. Date, PCR number, all these questions. If they answered yes, you should probably call med control, or they straight up don't have the decision-making capacity to sign off. And that's a whole other issue in itself. And you should document appropriately, which we'll talk about in sign-offs. If you talk to med control, these are the things that you should probably call med control for. And then if, they're cool with it and they're cool with it, and you can't force someone to go to the hospital, your name, your signature, your number. It's okay to write CPCR. If you give them specific information, you can also write that there, but I always find that it's not enough room. If this happens again, call the doctor, 911, seek medical attention, seizure, coma, death, blah, blah, blah. When they sign it, you want their name printed, signed, and then a witness if possible. If not, that's okay. And then the time they signed. Important. Just fill it out to the entirety. That's it. Now, the incorrect way to fill it out, George Washington was drunk and he signed. Not a date. That's not good. Writing down he doesn't want to is unacceptable. Also not acceptable. And then, I don't know why that would ever be acceptable, but you get the idea, right? Yes? Okay. Break? Okay. Wow. So, I don't know. You answer that question. Do you think we're bad?
As far as what?
Some people.
Documentation or?
Yeah, in general.
No, I think we do a good job.
Okay.
I mean, we.
Shifty. Everyone's kind of nervous.
We try to talk to patients going all the time.
Yeah, okay.
Can we go back to, I always get mixed up with the pediatric where mom and dad sign.
Under the patient one.
Patient guardian.
Which one?
Section 1.
Section 1.
I believe the small print at the top says that, or it used to.
No, it doesn't
No.
say
Patients
nothing.
say
Minor, if you write down minor,
Patient, minor, child.
that is a reason why the patient can't sign. And then you say legal guardian, that's a parent, and then you can
All right.
have the parent sign.
Okay, it used to say, I think it used to say minors in this section, or,
They might have
Parent?
other agencies.
Huh?
They might have other agencies,
Oh,
I think that's.
so
what it
that's why I
is.
get confused.
Right? It's pretty self-explanatory. Unless the patient is physically or mentally incapable of signing. Being a minor is being physically incapable of signing because you're not old enough to consent for transfer. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Titch, what makes a bad sign off?
Not getting enough information and documentation.
Spot on. You don't have an idea of what's going on, so you're not able to write down what's going on. It just looks bad. So grandma falls and it just says grandma fell, she just went to go to the hospital, back in service. You think that's okay?
No.
That leads me to question, like, did you just show up and say, oh, I'm sorry, okay, sorry to bother you, bye. Then how many times do you go on calls and you sign someone off and then later in the day, we go again?
Oh, we done
That's
that.
happened to me twice in a row.
How many times did we do that yesterday?
Yeah.
You go sign someone off and then they were a 980 that evening. Happened to me. Now, documentation saved my keister, and it was literally like bizarre that this thing happened. Like, it's not like I killed them. That's such a horrible thing to say. But it happens. So being able to write a good chart and saying, you know, write that chart as if they're going to call 911 again, and then we show up and take them to the hospital. And you should try to, if you really think they need to go to the hospital, tell them they need to go to the hospital. Be an advocate and write down that you tried. Write down the things that you tell them. Don't be a drone or a robot and say, you're going to die if you don't go to the hospital. It's overdone. We're all human beings. We should be able to relate to them as human beings. So the other thing that we don't do well, wait, Barb, you had your hand up?
No.
Oh,
Okay.
stretching?
I'm just gonna-
Not enough vitals. Now this goes for both sign-offs and activity logs and transport. So we know that one vital isn't great. 2 vitals, it's just a line, but you want a trend. So therefore you need 3 vitals. In order to see change, 3 is the magic number. It's okay to take, all right, good blood pressure, you talk to them, and while you're talking, another blood pressure. It's okay to do this over the course of 5 minutes. You're not gonna see a significant change, but it gives you documentation, it gives you proof, you know, quantitative proof that nothing's gonna change. Like all of a sudden your last pressure is like 60 over 40, and you're like, yeah, that's not right. You keep checking it, and then, you know, grandma, go to the hospital. I don't wanna. Then that happens. How many times have you been on calls where you kind of catch yourself sounding like a broken record, right? Like you could pass out again, you could fall again, and these people don't understand. And then we go back and we take them to the hospital. So being able to write down saying that you did tell them, you might pass out again. It informs them that they know what could happen. So a good one. What makes a good refusal? Brett, I haven't talked to you.
Oh, yeah, I felt left out.
Sorry.
Is it because I don't like things having fun?
Creepy.
Well,
Yes. So what makes a good sign off?
Detail, description. Not overly bloated, but I don't know.
Yeah, detail. That's it. That's perfect. Sometimes sign-offs go quick. You're there and then you're like, hey, okay, sign this piece of paper, check the vitals, talk to them really quick. And sometimes they're really drawn out because grandma doesn't want to go, but she should really go. Or she can't make up her mind. Just write down what happened. That's all you gotta do. And then this next part right here, realizing that they can sign off. A lot of providers I've seen, not here specifically, but everywhere, it's like this big misconception. Oh, drunks can't sign off. No, that's a care issue. Now, if they're like completely inebriated where they can't form complete coherent sentences and they don't know where they are, probably shouldn't be signing them off. It should be implied consent at that point. And you shouldn't be, what if they walk out into traffic and they get hit by a car? Because those are the ones that are going to happen. Now, you got your run-of-the-mill intoxes who are able to tell you where they are, what day of the week it is, all the good questions, their vitals are great, they're just drunk. Probably call a doc, but for the most part, right? They don't want to go. Being drunk isn't an emergency. But that's a different story. This is documentation. People who can't sign off. Can minors sign off?
Their parents.
Yeah, they can with the consent of their adult parent. Or someone who, the legal guardian.
Or child.
And then the last part right here, injuries, I feel like I shouldn't even have to say that. They can't sign off. Verbatim, write down what you said. Exhaust all your avenues. Like, hey, do you have an aide coming in later? Stuff like that. Are you gonna be in good hands? Can I leave you here by yourself? If not, then what if you fall again?
You have to give the patient PCP.
Or tranquilizers.
Yeah, Brad. It's a new advisory, it came out yesterday. Sometimes I say, promise me you're going to make an appointment with your doctor. I don't care if they make an appointment with their doctor. Just to say that they are going to make one, I can write down on my chart and said, I asked them to make an appointment. They said yes. Now, whether or not they do it or not, I don't care. I hope they do because I want them to feel better. Like, they pass out and then they refuse. How many times have you had syncopal episode patients and they sign off? Which is like, man, you passed out. Could be serious. Could not be serious. Yeah. It's easy. Questions about sign-offs?
Is there a template almost for ones that are, I sat on my alert button and it went off?
That's mostly like a cancel.
Is it? Because what if you
Yeah, so a lot of,
actually
I've heard people, there's validity to this very story. So, just so you know, it's done. I answer some questions here. You're fine, you're fine. It's actually 9 o'clock, hour and a half on the dot. I've heard the mantra of if you lay eyes on the patient, therefore you need to write a chart and fill out an assessment. Now, if I'm Jordan and the patient's over there and she's saying, oh no, I don't want to go to the hospital, I'm not going to run after her and say, I need to sign you off, sign here, sign here, sign here. That's not appropriate, that's kind of unprofessional. But are there certain people that you're like, why are we signing this person off? There's no reason for us to be the med alert button. I stepped on my med alert, my cat hit it. Am I gonna sign her off? No, because I'm gonna get put up last in the run order, sure. but is it really necessary? I wouldn't pull that. No.
Good to know.
Adam takes a lot of sign-offs, right? No, but you get what I'm trying to say. Like, there's a lot of instances where like,
People
Should
driving
I?
by and calling on something.
Yeah.
And there's no car, no issue with the car accident.
Yeah, and then because we
So,
throw myself under the bus. We went to a car accident. Everyone refused everything. I'm not gonna sit there and sign every single person off. If they have no complaints, they don't want to get evaluated by an ambulance, and then we say we wrote a cancel chart, but like cancel not seen. I feel bad making specifics, but it was flagged saying that patients can't cancel themselves.
well, I remember.
Define what a patient is.
What's that mean?
A couple years
They
ago-
can't cancel. If I say canceled on scene by patient, I was told that you can't cancel yourself, which makes sense because a patient can't really cancel themselves. They can cancel themselves, but like
Potential patient.
if I call 911 and then I call back and say I don't want an ambulance anymore, what did I just do? I cancel the ambulance. However, if I walked in, or say Jimmy and Mel are on duty, and I call an ambulance, they show up, they make eye contact with me, and I said, I'm sorry guys, I don't want to go to the hospital, I'm fine.
No, but what if he called the ambulance for it?
Right.
If a third party calls, then.
You gotta
there's
figure out
no
what's going on.
medical problem.
You don't know that, yeah.
You know, I didn't request you. You know, there's nothing wrong with me. I have no complaints, you know.
But do I-
I'm sleeping in my truck because I'm waiting to.
Go to
But
work.
Susie,
Go to
do
work.
you-
Yeah, I have to pick up
You get
Susie because her
some
car's in the shop, and I'm sleeping in my truck waiting to pick her up. There's nothing wrong with me medically. I remember a couple years ago, there was a definition put out by the region that said, anytime that you make contact with a patient, or you
Yes.
see a patient, or a patient sees you, we need to do a sign-off. And then they had a rebuttal that said, we're gonna clarify this.
Mhm.
If it's a third-party call and they don't have a medical problem, they're not technically a patient. But
Yeah.
that was a couple years ago, I
Sure.
remember that coming out. So I think that was the
And
clarification.
it's
that-
the most current advisory as well, because we did some research, and that's it. That's all you're able to find.
And you can also explain, you know, like in that case, you know, the patient was at the door, she was walking, you know. she
And if you
was
write down,
she was
hit a
ambulance
medical
worried
alert,
about
but
it.
I have a hunch that that might cause some concern with S1, or even S2 or S3. I don't know how an ALS chart would get into, or a medical alarm pushed get into S3, but I would imagine that, like, if I don't thoroughly,
No response.
yeah, right, or if I make contact with a patient and I don't write a sign off, maybe I'm just not writing the chart in an appropriate manner, but I feel like I'm writing it in an appropriate manner. I feel like most charts that I read that are of medical alarm cancellations are appropriate.
Define them, but you gotta define what what it means.
The
to be a
catwalk
patient.
on it.
What
Yeah.
defines a patient? I mean, right
Someone
now,
who
are
calls
you a
down-
patient?
I'm a patient. I could be a patient.
So if the
I
cat
call
steps on it,
911.
It's not a patient.
I mean, there's
It's
no-
true.
there's
You're
no
right.
patient.
You're
right.
There's no patient. in
Not
this.
getting the call.
I mean,
That's
unless
true.
the-
She didn't
and
call
like
either.
at your NBCs, when we get called because the police want somebody checked out at the fender bender because.
I'm refusing all.
Well, the police will do it to cover their buck because,
Right.
well, we're not medical profession, but you
Right.
get there and they're like, I didn't even want an ambulance.
Right.
They
They're
call
not a
one for me.
patient.
Don't come near me.
I mean, they are a patient because police called it, but
Mhm.
are you doing a sign off?
And then are you doing them a disservice by saying, hey, do you mind if I evaluate you really quick? And then, like, get a sign off on them.
I mean, if they're truly not a
I
patient,
feel
then
like,
why are
yeah.
we, why are you?
And then they're
signing
gonna,
off?
and then they get roped up into this whole thing like, oh wait, maybe I should go to the hospital. No.
For nothing.
For nothing. Now that gets into a weird gray area of like, we should be telling everyone to go to the hospital because it's our job, but at the same time, should you? Something to think about. Yes, Doug.
Yes, I do.
Hold on,
I'm
Doug's
trying to
got
make
a,
this a show, this is gonna be a good one.
Doug's got a prolific idea.
Two parents, the police officer messed up saying it was for the female when it was actually the male, the
Yeah.
other guy was injured.
Uh-huh.
So we went up towards the female, she said, I'm not, I know I
Sure,
am."
call back in
And then we
service.
ended up, no, then we went over to the, then someone said, no, it's the male that needs.
Oh, okay.
you guys." I think we at least got the patient refusal, basically just saying, well, she don't want no EMS or intervention from us.
Yeah.
I got flagged because I didn't have her sign the MV, the motor vehicle accident form, because then I said, well, we didn't do anything for it, we agreed with all. Don't get that signed
They're still
because
billing.
it's gonna collect money from insurance company for it.
That's correct. They're still doing
Yeah.
If you do an actual assignment.
It's
all the more reason to not sign people off that don't
Exactly.
want it, because they're getting a bill.
They're getting a bill, and that's why I've gotten. the-
Anyone involved in a car accident, like if you sign someone off or transport someone that's been involved in a MVC, you need to fill out the MVC form.
Even if it's multiple people in the first.
Correct, so we get the question a lot, but it's not my car that was in the accident. We're a passenger in the car. I don't know, just get it signed so that way if something does happen down the line, we have consent to talk to the insurance company. Right? That's as far as I'm concerned, that's what we do it for. There's a lot of like weird situations that come up with sign-offs. And I feel like with transports, it's like, just go, you're good. So
It's easier.
hopefully, yeah, it's easy. It's easier. It's easier to take people to the hospital than sign people up.
There's less risk too.
Less risk, right? Questions? Hopefully this helped you out. I know it's a lot of review. It's a lot of stuff that you are already good at, you're proficient at it. But hopefully you picked up one or two things, and now you can say, yes, I have had a comprehensive training in documentation.